A Star and a Stranger. Part 5. Chapters 16 to 21. Chapter 16, The Reunion. The world rolled by the window, the wind riding on the passing train like an old friend. It had been a few weeks since he'd left, a few weeks since he'd seen Minji, and the burden of all he'd been carrying felt heavier than ever. He tightened the strap of his bag and started walking, the thud of his feet hitting the pavement blending in with the activity-packed streets. When he turned a corner, a large poster caught his eye. It was an advertisement for the Seoul Music Festival. The large letters and bright colors were hard to overlook, and his eyes remained stuck on the list of performers, his heart skipping a beat at the name, New Jeans. Minji! He froze, his breath clogging in his throat as he gazed at the poster. Images from their previous rendezvous invaded his recollection. How she had gazed at him, how her voice had shaken in saying farewell. He had attempted to find some other direction in life, to concentrate on the path he had begun, but catching her name like this, so vivid and resentment-filled, sent everything flooding back. "You a fan of New Jeans?" The voice startled him, and Xavian turned to see a man standing near him, a curious smile on his face. He held a stack of flyers, his eyes darting between Xavian and the poster. "No," Xavian said angrily, sharper than he wanted. "Just passing by." The man arched an eyebrow but said nothing more. "You know, if you change your mind, the festival's this weekend. Should be a great show." Xavian nodded, his throat tight, and turned and walked away before the man could say anything more. Thoughts juggled in his head as he tried to sort what he just witnessed. New Jeans had a set time at the festival. Minji would be there, and so would he. Finally, the big day had come, a hive of energy and potential. Xavian stood at the back of the crowd, his hands shoved deep inside his pockets as he waited for New Jeans to take the stage. He had tried to convince himself not to come, that it was best to keep his distance, but here he was, pulled toward her as if she were the flame and he the moth. As the lights dimmed and the opening notes of their song wafted through the air, Xavian's breath caught in his throat. Standing center stage under a searing spotlight was Minji, her visage triumphantly agonized. She moved with a kind of grace and confidence that almost mesmerized the crowd, but Xavian's focus was entirely on her. He watched her as she danced, every movement fluid and exacting, her voice spilling into the air like a melody he couldn't escape. She was magnificent, and for a moment Xavian forgot about everything else. The crowd, the noise, the burden of his own mind. All that mattered was her. But as the show continued, Xavian's mind started to wander. He recalled when he had last spoken to her, how she had kissed him before she ran out. He thought of the journey he had begun, the things he had hoped to leave behind. And he considered the future, whether there was still a place for him in her life. And when the performance was over, the crowd thundered with applause, but Xavian did not join in. His heart weighed down as he observed Minji and the others bow. He knew he ought to leave, that he had no business being here, yet he couldn't force himself to budge. As he started to walk away, his eyes turned back toward the stage one last time. And it was then that he spotted her, Minji, searching the crowd with her gaze, limbs and features inscrutable. As their eyes briefly locked onto one another, shocks of electricity shot through Xavian, causing him to shiver. But then Minji turned away, her eyes returning to her group mates, and Xavian knew it was time for him to leave. With that, he turned on his heel and walked away, the roar of the crowd fading behind him as he stepped into the night. Minji was backstage, amid the familiar chaos of a post-performance logjam. Her group mates were chattering excitedly, voices overlapping as they discussed the show, the crowd, the energy. But Minji was preoccupied with something else. She had sensed it the instant she had stepped on the stage, a strange, almost magnetic pull she couldn't quite explain. It had distracted her initially, her mind wandering back to Xavian even as she tried her best to concentrate. But once the music began, she was in the moment, and everything was focused on the performance. And now, back there, the sensation returned, more intense than ever. Her gaze swept the room, her eyes moving from face to face, but she didn't see what, or who, she was searching for. "Nice work out there," her manager said, patting her on the shoulder. "But if you stay at this rate, you might actually deserve a break." Minji registered those words barely and nodded absently as he said them, still in her own head. She needed air, room to think, but before she could excuse herself, something piqued her interest. Someone standing with his back to the crowd in the famous image, occulted. There was something about him that felt familiar to her, something that made her heart bubble up and skip a few beats. Minji took a step towards him without thinking, eyes following the figure as he disappeared into the shadows. And then, just as he was vanishing, he turned and their eyes locked for the briefest moment in time. It was Xavian. Minji froze, the air caught in her throat as their gazes met. But before she could react, he'd disappeared, swallowed by the crowd and the noise. Minji? And her groupmate's expressions, a mixture of curiosity and concern, pierced the haze. Hanny's voice. "I'm fine," Minji said hastily, putting on a smile. "Just had thought I recognized someone I knew." Her groupmates looked at one another, but did not push back. Minji glanced back at the space where Xavian had been standing, her heart racing in her chest. He had been here. He had seen her. And now he was gone. Chapter 17, Hope. It was the after-party of the festival, the room filled with clattering laughter, chatter, and the clink of glasses. Minji hovered at the fringes of the crowd with a glass of water in her hand, forcing a smile for the cameras and the well-wishers. Her groupmates occupied spots around the room, Hanny energetically relaying the performance to a cluster of producers, Heron quietly observing from a corner, and Danielle and Hyan mixing with fans and industry insiders. But Minji had other things on her mind. She could not get the figure she saw earlier out of her mind, the one that had looked so much like Xavian. That brief second they had locked eyes had made her restless, with her heart pounding with hope and fear. What if it had been him? What if he remained out there, somewhere in the city, lying in wait for her? Before she had the chance to second-guess herself, Minji placed her glass down and slipped out of the room, the movements swift and intentional. She had no destination in mind, but knew she couldn't remain here. Not when the chance at reuniting with Xavian was so near. Now the streets were still and quiet, the festival crowd dissipating as people headed home. Minji roamed onwards, footsteps ringing hard against the pavement as she searched the darkness for any signs of him. Something in her, a quiet, insistent pull, showed her what to do, where to start. And then she saw it. A scraggly little cat was crouched by a street lamp, its amber eyes shining in the twilight. Minji froze, her breath hitching in her throat. It was Ghost. It gave a quick look up before darting off into the alley, its tail twitching nervously. Minji paused only briefly before trailing after it, heart racing in her chest. It was too familiar, the memories of that night all rushing back. She rounded the corner, eyes sweeping the shadowed space, and there he was. Xavian. He stood slumped against the wall, hands in pockets and eyes cast downward. He looked different somehow. Taller, more guarded, but the quiet intensity was the same. Minji's breath caught as she moved forward, her voice shaking as she spoke. "You're here." When Xavian's gaze lifted to meet hers, his expression was unreadable. For an instant, neither of them said anything, the silence between them fraught with everything left unspoken. "I wasn't sure you would come," Xavian finally said, his voice low and steady. Minji shook her head, her pulse quickening. "I had to. I couldn't just let you go." Xavian's expression softened, and he stepped closer, his hands still in his pockets. "You shouldn't be here, Minji. It's not safe." "I don't care," she said, her voice steady except for a shudder in her chest. "I've tried for weeks to forget you, to move on, but I ain't able. I don't want to." The absorbed look on Xavian's face faltered, and for a moment, Minji thought he was going to pivot and stride away. And then he sighed, tousling his hair absent-mindedly as he gazed at her. "Haven't you got any idea what you're asking for?" He said softly. I'm not who you think I am." "Then tell me," Minji said, moving closer. "Tell me who you are. Let me in." Xavian paused, looking over his shoulder for a beat, and then returning his eyes to meet hers. "It's not that simple. It doesn't have to be complicated," Minji responded, her voice low but firm. "I don't need to know everything. I just need to know you." Xavian didn't reply for a long moment. Then, finally, he extended his hand, grazing it against hers. It lingered lightly, almost uncertain, but it sent a shiver through Minji. "You're impossible," he said at last, a shadow of a smile at his lips. Minji smiled back, a wave of relief and hope swelling through her. "You're not exactly a walk in the park, either." For a moment they just stood there, the hum of the city around them, before Xavian said, "I don't know where this is going," he said softly. "But if you're willing to take the risk, so am I." Minji felt her breath catch in her throat, and for the first time in weeks felt a flicker of something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Chapter 18, a break? Minji stepped back into the dorm room, still breathing hard from her run-in with Xavian. She had been out longer than she should have, the conversation with him running through her mind as she headed home. The streets were quiet, the city settling into late-night stillness, but her thoughts could not be so peaceful. When she closed the door behind her, she was met with the familiar buzz of the dorm. Hanny's laughter ringing from the living room, the muffled sound of music playing from Heron's room, and the quiet conversation coming from the kitchen from Danielle and Hyan. As the camera faded, Minji hesitated, unsure what to say. But before she could think of an excuse, came Hanny's voice. "Minji, where have you been? We were about to call a search party." Hanny, Heron, and the rest of the group were settled in the living room, where Minji greeted them with a forced smile. "Sorry, I just had to find some air after the festival. It was a lot." Hanny tilted her head, looking curious and concerned. "You've been acting weird lately, Uni. Are you sure you're okay?" Minji nodded, losing a bit of her smile. "I'm fine, just tired." Before Hanny could push her further, their manager entered. The usually regimented woman's no-nonsense stony expression suddenly softened by the glimmer of a smile. "Great job tonight, everyone. The festival organizers were impressed, the fans adored. Continue that way, and perhaps you will earn yourselves a respite." Everyone in the room broke out into cheers, and the excitement in the air was thick as the members exchanged high fives and smiles. Minji was secretly delighted, her mind flickering to Xavian. A break meant time to see him, to work things out, to finally breathe. But she quickly schooled her expression, not wanting any attention on her. Still, she could not suppress the slight smile that played on her lips. Heron, always observant, noticed. Her sharp eyes took in everything as they exchanged a look with Hanny, but she said nothing. Not yet. That night, Minji was lying in bed, her phone lit up in the dark room. She had been texting Xavian, her fingers flying across the screen as she explained the break. "Minji, we're going to soon have some time off. A proper break. I'll finally have time to, see you." The response came quickly. "Xavian, that's great. We'll figure something out." Minji beamed at the prospect, finally getting to spend time with him without the stress of her timetable looming over her. Another message bubbled out of her, and she typed frantically. "Minji, maybe we go somewhere. Just the two of us. No cameras, no fans, no one to see." There was a hesitating silence before Xavian responded. "Xavian, sounds perfect. Let me know when." Minji set her phone down briefly, her mind racing. For the first time in weeks, she felt hope, lightness. But as she fell asleep, she couldn't help but feel as if something or someone was watching. In the living room, Hanny and Heron sat on the couch, speaking quietly. When the manager said the break, "Did you see her face?" Hanny asked, her tone playful but curious. "She had the same look as when you just hit the lottery." Heron nodded with a contemplative look on her face. "I noticed. And she's been acting weird lately, sneaking out, not coming home after the festival. She's back together with him, I think." Hanny's eyes widened. "Xavian? You really think so?" "It makes sense," Heron said, her voice steady but strong. "Oh, she's been distracted, smiling to herself, texting somebody late at night. And now this break. She's planning something." In this last moment, Hanny smirked, her playful side coming out. "We should follow her. When she sneaks out next time, we can see for ourselves." Heron hesitated, her practical mind clashing with her curiosity. "Is that a smart idea? What if she catches us?" "We'll be careful," Hanny added, grinning wider. "Anyway, don't you want to see what this guy looks like? That mysterious Xavian who's got our Minji all hot and bothered?" Heron sighed, but with a glimmer in her eye. "Fine, but if this blows up in our faces, it's on you." Hanny chuckled, giddy with excitement. "Deal. Operation Spy on Minji is a go." Minji woke the next morning feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The prospect of the break, and the opportunity to spend time with Xavian, instilled a longing in her that she hadn't had for years. She joined them for breakfast, the smile on her face genuine as she listened to their plans for the break. "I'm thinking of going to see my family," Danielle said, her voice cheery. "I haven't seen them in so long. I'm just going to sleep," Hyan said playfully. "For like 3 days straight." Hanny and Heron shared a knowing glance, having just discussed the very topic. But they remained silent, their plan to tail Minji unknown. The days dragged on, and Minji counted down the minutes until she would see Xavian again. She didn't know what the future held, but she felt like she was where she was supposed to be, for the first time in a long time. Chapter 19, A Day Together. The morning sunlight seeped through Minji's window curtains. Excited for the day ahead, she woke with a smile. Today was the day, her first day off, the first day she'd spend with Xavian, and not with the weight of her schedule pressing down on her. She grabbed her phone database, typing out a text quickly. "Minji, good morning. Are we still on for today?" The reply was strikingly instant and direct. "Xavian, of course. Meet me at the cafe at 9? Minji paused for a moment. Her smile only got wider as she typed her reply. Minji, let's have it earlier. 8. That way we have more time. After a moment, Xavian spoke up. Xavian, 8 it is. See you soon. Minji put down her phone, her heart racing and anxiety pricking at her mind. She got dressed quickly in a layup outfit, a sweater, jeans, and left the dorm. The others were still asleep, the dorm silent, but for the gentle whir of the refrigerator. She placed a note on the kitchen counter, just in case. Went out for a walk. Don't wait up. Minji, unbeknownst to Minji, Hanny and Heron were not as unconscious as she assumed. By the crack in Hanny's door, 2 pairs of eyes saw Minji tiptoe down the hallway and out the front door. She's leaving, Hanny said, in a whisper that barely reached Heron's ears. I told you she was up to something. Heron sighed as she rubbed her eyes. Do we have to do this? It's so early. Yes, we do. Hanny snarled, already yanking on a hoodie. This is our opportunity to finally lay eyes on this elusive Xavian. Aren't you curious? There was a pause, Heron's practical side fighting her curiosity. Fine, but if this blows up in our faces, it's on you. A smile spread across Hanny's face. Deal. Let's go. The cafe was quiet when Minji entered, the early morning crowd still slim. She saw Xavian already seated at their regular table by the window, a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked up when she came near, a slight smile playing on his lips. You're early, he said, his voice warm yet teasing. So are you, Minji said, slipping into the seat opposite him. I didn't want to lose any time. Xavian grinned, setting a second cup of coffee in front of her. I figured you'd need this. Minji accepted the cup, heat rushing into her hands as she drank. You know me too well. The quiet hum of the cafe surrounded them as they sat in silence for a moment. It was one of those rare moments of tranquility, and Minji soaked it up, taking a lingering look at Xavian's face. He looked different now in the morning light, softer, less tense. It was a side of him she hadn't seen before, and it made her heart ache in the best way. Hanny and Heron crouched outside the cafe, hiding behind a parked car, focused on the window where Minji and Xavian were sitting. That's him? Hanny whispered in a tone of awe. He's kind of cute. Heron rolled her eyes but failed to not smile at her lips. Focus, Hanny. We're here to observe, not gawk. I'm observing. Hanny protested, playing coy. And I can tell that he's totally Minji's type. Just look how she's smiling at him. As Hanny's eyes settled on Minji and Xavian, Heron softened as she turned her head to see Minji and Xavian in conversation. Minji's lightness, a wholeness she hadn't felt in weeks, settled around her like a blanket, and it was a comforting if annoying overtone that made her heartstrings ache in a way she couldn't quite articulate. She seems happy, Heron said softly. Really happy. Hanny nodded, mischief replaced by an unusual seriousness. Yeah, she does. Back inside the cafe, Minji and Xavian downed their coffee and set off into the city. They took the morning to roam the streets, strolled on the walk at a leisurely pace. They pulled over at a small public park, and the trees swayed in a gentle wind, and they sat on a bench and watched the world go by. Minji rested her head against Xavian's shoulder, the two of them discussing anything and everything. Have you any of your mind on the future? Minji asked, her voice soft. Xavian paused to gaze at the horizon. Sometimes, but it's difficult to prepare when you don't know what's ahead. Minji just nodded, tracing shapes on the bench with her fingers. I know what you mean, but part of me likes to pretend. What if it were different? Xavian looked at her then, studying her eyes. What do you imagine? Minji grinned, a faint pink coloring her cheeks. Just us. Together. No cameras, no schedules, no one looking. Just this. Xavian's initial reaction softened, and he took hold of her palm, his fingers winding in between hers. I like the sound of that. Hanny and Heron trailed behind at a distance, their attempts to sneak around more funny than successful. They ducked behind lampposts, pretended to be browsing shop windows, and at one point, hid behind the parasol attached to a Chinese food cart, fielding a few puzzled glances from passers-by. This is harder than it looks, Hanny said through a sidelong glance, adjusting her sunglasses. Minji has no choice but to go through that quickly. Heron sighed, wrapping her hoodie around her face. Perhaps because she didn't expect to be followed by her two curious groupmates. Hanny grinned, undeterred. It's worth it. Look at them, they're adorable. It was like something from a drama. Heron couldn't dispute that. Minji was not around. Xavian realized in a world that had been gypsy before his eyes but was now blooming. During the course of the day, Minji and Xavian wandered around the city visiting a small bookstore, a quiet cafe, and even a street market which they shared a plate of hotteok for. It was simple, and for Minji it was a relief. She laughed more than she had in weeks. "I don't remember the last time I did something like this," she said, walking along the river as the sun started to set. "Not me," Xavian said, his voice low. "It's nice, being with you." Minji felt her heart swell at his words and squeezed his hand. "I feel the same way." They paused at a little bridge, the lights of the city starting to flicker on around them. Xavian glanced toward her, his face a serious yet soft mask. "Thank you," he said, so softly as to be almost inaudible. "For today. For everything." Minji smiled with tears on the verge of erupting from her eyes. "Thank you, too. For being here. For being you." For a heartbeat, they remained perfectly still, everything disappearing from around them while the two fell into each other. Then Xavian finally leaned in, and their lips met in a soft, sweet kiss that said all the things they couldn't. Hanny and Heron were watching from behind a tree, and their eyes grew wide. "Did they just—" Hanny breathed as if awed. "Yes," Heron said, her voice quiet. "They did." Silence enveloped the two of them for a moment, the gravity of what they had just seen creeping over them. Hanny then smiled, her excitement overflowing. "We have to tell the others." Heron shook her head, a smile tugging on her lips. "No, we don't. This is Minji's secret, and for now it's ours to hold." Hanny pouted but did not protest. Instead, she looked back to watch Minji and Xavian walk away, holding hands. "Well, you're right," Hanny finally said, "but this one is surely going into my diary." Chapter 20, A Quiet Afternoon. Minji was online in an internet cafe with Xavian, sitting side by side in a cozy land setting, the air filled with the hum of computers and the occasional click-clack of keyboards. The low light and neon accents gave the space a futuristic feel, yet the warmth between them made it feel intimate. It was their second day together during Minji's break, and the ease between them had only deepened. They had no plans, no agenda, just the simple pleasure of being with one another. "It's nice," Minji said softly as she looked at Xavian. Her fingers paused over the keyboard, and her character sat still on the screen. "Just being here with you." Xavian grinned. His eyes were glued to his monitor as he piloted his character across a digital battlefield. "It is. I could get used to this." Minji laughed, color rising to her cheeks as she went back to her screen. They were playing a co-op game, which Xavian had recommended after she said she was not a gamer. He had promised to give her lessons, and, while she was still getting the feel for the controls, she was having a blast. "Okay, so if I push this button, I can heal you, right?" Minji said, a hint of confusion on her brow. "Exactly," Xavian said, leaning to point at her keyboard. "And if you land this one, you can cast a shield. But be careful with your mana. You do not want to run out of it in the middle of a fight." Minji nodded, her tongue slipping out between her lips as her gaze sharpened. When she managed to cast a protective shield just in the nick of time to save Xavian's character on the brink of a deadly attack, he sighed dramatically as if a close encounter had been averted. "You're a natural," he said, smiling. "I may have to sign you onto my team." Minji chuckled and shook her head. "Don't get ahead of yourself. I still don't even know what mana is." For the next hour, they were engrossed in the game, laughter and mild ribbing echoing around the empty area between them. Minji was slowly able to relax, the pressures of her day-to-day life fading away as she focused on the joy of living in the moment. During a slow moment in the game, Minji sat back in her chair, reaching her arms over her head. "What's next? Do you ever think about what comes next?" she asked, her voice a whisper. Xavian hesitated, staring at the screen. "Sometimes, but I try not to. I'd rather just live in the moment." Minji nodded, her heart soaring at his words. She felt the same way. The future was uncertain, but for now this would do. When the sun was beginning to go down, they said it was time to end. Keeping a safe distance away to avoid drawing attention, Xavian walked Minji back toward her dorm. "I'll let you take it from here," he said, his voice gentle as he looked toward the building. "Don't want to bother you." Minji beamed, her heart skipping at his thoughtfulness. "Thank you. For today. For everything." Xavian smiled in return, his hand grazing against hers. "Thank you, too. For being here. For being you." And for a long moment it was just them, the great wide world falling away as they got lost in one another's eyes. Then, slowly, Xavian leaned in, brushing his lips against hers in a kiss soft and sweet, and full of everything they could not say. "I'll see you soon," Minji said softly, pulling away and blushing. "You can bank on it," Xavian replied, his smile still etched on his face as he stared at her walking away to her dorm. Back inside, Hanny was pacing the living room with excitement. She had been dying to tell someone what she and Heron had seen the day before, but Heron had insisted they keep it a secret. Hanny, however, was not exactly secretive. "Hanny, sit down," Heron said, sounding exasperated. "You're going to wear a hole in the floor." "I can't help it," Hanny said, her voice growing louder. "It's too big to hold inside myself. I mean, Minji is dating somebody. Someone cute, and we saw them kiss. How am I supposed to act normal after this?" "Ugh," Heron said, pinching the bridge of her nose. "By not telling anyone. Not even Hyan and Danielle." And just then, Hyan and Danielle walked into the room, intrigued expressions on their faces. "Tell us what?" Hyan inquired, her eyes narrowing. "Nothing," Hanny said quickly, her voice a register higher than usual. Danielle folded her arms and looked back at Hanny and Heron. "You're hiding something." "Spill." Hanny looked over at Heron, who shot her a warning look, but it was too late. The words were already spilling out. "Minji's dating someone," Hanny stammered, her hands flying to her mouth the moment the words escaped. Never mind." Hyan gasped, Danielle's mouth dropped. "What? Minji's dating someone? Who? When? How do you know?" Heron groaned and buried her face in her hands. "Hanny, I couldn't help it," Hanny said, her tone one of defense. "It just slipped out." Hyan and Danielle gave each other knowing looks. "Okay, go back to the beginning," Hyan said, taking a seat on the couch. "We need details." Hanny hesitated, though the cat was out of the bag. She plopped onto a chair, bursting to tell them everything she and Heron had done all the previous day. The cafe, the park, the kiss on the bridge. "Wait," Danielle said suddenly, her brow furrowing. "Was it that dude from way back when? Xavian or something of the like?" Hanny's eyes lit up. "Yes, that's him. Such a cutie, and Minji was so happy. It was like a scene from a drama." Valentina appeared incredulous. Hyan looked gleeful. "Wow," Danielle said finally. "Minji kept this from us, I can't believe it." "Maybe she didn't want us to care for her," Heron said, her voice steady but firm. "Or to blow it up. To which we're currently doing," Hyan noted, her lips quirked into a smile. Hanny grinned, unapologetic. "You know what, now that you've got it, we all can keep an eye out for her. Make sure this Xavian fella is good enough for our Minji." Heron sighed, though there was a twinkle of humor in her eyes. "Just make sure Minji doesn't find out we've been spying on her. She'll kill us." Minji, on the other hand, was walking to the dorm, her heart still racing from the events of the day. She hoped that the memory of Xavian's kiss would never ever leave her lips. As she stepped in, she saw her groupmates all huddled together, their talk stopping as they all turned to her. "Hey," Minji said, kicking off her shoes and speaking casually. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Hanny said quickly, her voice slightly pitched up. Minji looked from one to the other, then looked at the ground. "Uh-huh, sure." On her way to her room, she thought about what they were doing, but for now she cared too little to care. Chapter 21, Taking Care of You. Minji's phone buzzes the next morning after their LAN cafe date. His familiar bright tone is absent, and we get a terse, remorseful note. "Oh, I think I got the flu or something. Feeling pretty rough. Could be canceling our plans for today. Sorry." Minji's heart sinks when she opens the message. She starts texting right back, asking if she can bring him medicine or anything he needs. At first, Xavian protests that he'll be fine by himself, but Minji won't hear it. "You're not going to get rid of me that easily," she says on the line, her tone strident but easy. "Tell me where you live. I'm coming over." Reluctantly, Xavian provides her with his address, and Minji rushes to prepare, hurrying to pack a bag with some medicine, soup, a couple of comfort things. When she leaves her room, Hyan is in the hallway. "Going somewhere?" Hyan asks, her tone easy but her eyes sharp with curiosity. "Just running some errands," Minji replies as she puts on her shoes, avoiding eye contact. Hyan raises an eyebrow but doesn't pry. "Okay, be careful out there." Minji nods, her heart pounding as she heads out of the dorm. She can't shake the feeling that Hyan knows more than she's saying. When she enters Xavian's apartment, she is taken aback by how quiet and cozy it is. He opens the door looking pale and shifty, his hair wild and a blanket around his shoulders. "You didn't need to come," he says in a hoarse voice. "I didn't want to," Minji says, walking inside. "Now go lie down. I'll handle it all." Minji arranges her schedule and comes over to Xavian's apartment every day for the next few days, at first observing him and fussing over him, then feeding him, forcing him to eat, and eventually helping him to stand and walk. She makes him soup, orders him to drink lots of fluids, and corrals him into watching cheesy rom-coms with her when he's able. Their dialogue during this period is deeper and more intimate than it's ever been. Xavian pours out his heart about his family, what frightens him, and what his hopes are, and Minji shares her own confessions. They laugh, they swap anecdotes, and at one point, Xavian even pokes fun at her for being a self-proclaimed mother hen. "I'm not a mother hen," Minji protests, batting at his arm playfully. "I care about you, that's all, okay?" Xavian smiles, his eyes soft. "I know, and I care about you too." As Xavian begins to feel better again, Minji acknowledges how much she'll miss these quiet moments once her break is over. But she also knows they cannot remain in this bubble forever. On the final day of her vacation, Minji assists Xavian in cleaning his apartment and making a decent meal for them to enjoy together. They sit together at his little dining table, the mood bittersweet. "This is me, I love you," Xavian says, his voice sincere. "For everything. I don't know what I would have done without you." Minji smiles, but there is sadness in her eyes. "You would have survived. But I'm grateful I could make it here." They discuss moving forward, how Minji will once again be busy with her group's schedule, how Xavian has his own work to focus on. They both know that things will change when they return to their usual routines, but they promise to make time for one another. "No matter how crazy things get," Xavian says, grabbing her hand, "I want to keep seeing you. If that's okay with you." His words make Minji's heart swell. It's more than okay. The sense of happiness, gratitude, even a little anxiety about the tomorrow that awaits her sets in as she walks out of his apartment that evening. But she also has a sense of purpose. Whatever happens next, she's ready for it. Returning to the dorm, Minji is welcomed by laughter in the living room. She halts in the corridor, inhaling deeply before moving into the room. "There she is," Danielle says with a teasing tone. "We were beginning to wonder if you'd moved away." Minji gives a forced laugh and drops her bag on the floor next to the door. "Just been busy. You know how it is." "Very interesting," Hanny, who is cross-legged on the couch, says, giving her a knowing look. "Busy, huh? Doing what exactly?" Minji's cheeks go pink, but she maintains her tone of play. "Just stuff. Errands. Things." Finally, Heron, who's been sitting at my side, quietly observing from the corner, speaks up. "Minji, we know." Minji gasps and stops in her tracks, her heart zeroing in between fluttering in her chest. "Know what? It's about Xavian," Hyen says, arms crossed but eyes soft. "We know you've been seeing him." Minji's stomach drops. She opens her mouth to protest, but the expressions of her groupmates stall it. They're neither angry nor judgmental, just worried. "How long have you known?" she asks quietly, plopping down in a chair. A while Hanny croaks, her voice apologetic. "We didn't want to snoop, but it's like kinda hard not to when you're in everybody's business all the time." Minji lets out a sigh and runs a hand through her hair. "I didn't want to make a fuss about it. I thought you might be better off not knowing." "We understand," Danielle says, her tone gentle. "But you don't have to hide this from us. We're your team, Minji. We're here for you." Heron nods in agreement. "We just want you to be safe. And you know how things go in this industry. If the wrong people find out." "I know," Minji says, her voice a whisper. "I've been trying to be careful. But it's hard." Hyen sits down next to her and touches her shoulder. "We're not mad, okay? We just want you to be happy. But you have to promise us that you'll be smart about this." Minji goes around her group mates, her heart full and grateful. "I promise. And thank you for not being strange about it." Hanny smiles, releasing the tension. "Oh, we will tease you about it later. But for now, we'll just let it slide." The audience bursts out laughing. Minji is feeling somewhat light following the burdens. For the first time in weeks, she feels like she is not carrying this secret alone. Once the initial shock of her groupmate's revelation passes, Minji is curled on the couch, sitting cross-legged with a cup of tea against her palms. The laughter that had filled the room earlier has settled into a more serious mood now. "Well," Hyen finally says, breaking the silence, "what are we going to do now? Are you going to continue to see that guy?" Minji falters, her eyes drifting down to the wisps of steam curling up from her tea. "I want to," she admits quietly. "But I know it's not going to be easy, with our schedules and everything else." "And that you're an idol," Heron dryly adds, though her tone is not unkind. "You know how the media are. If they find out—" "I know," Minji cuts in, the frustration clear in her voice. "I've contemplated it a million different ways. But I can't really stop seeing him. Not when he makes me feel this happy." Another silence envelopes the room, the impact of her words lingering in the air. Danielle finally speaks up, her voice soft. "We're not telling you to stop seeing him, Minji. We simply want you to be careful. And that we've got you in whatever way." Minji looks up, tears pooling in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispers. "I mean, I don't know what I'd do without you guys." The ever-hopeful Hanny grins as she shimmies closer to Minji. Enough of the serious stuff, right? Tell us more about him. What's he like? Is he cute in person as he looked when we... Hanny's cut off mid-sentence as Heron clears her throat loudly. Hanny freezes, her eyes growing wide as she knows she's about to leak that she followed Minji. Hanny's eyes narrow, darting between Hanny and Heron. Wait, what do you mean, when we? What did you two do? Hanny chuckles nervously while scratching the back of her head. Nothing. Just like, hypotheticals. Heron gasps and rubs her nose bridge. We may have inadvertently spotted you two together. Once. Or twice. Minji's jaw drops. You were following me? Not following. Hanny holds her hands up in protest. More like, just watching casually. From a distance. For your own good. Minji moans, hitting her head against her hands. Unbelievable. I can't believe you too. Danielle and Hyen share one of those look of amused disbelief. Well, at least we know they care, Danielle tries to joke. Too much, Minji mutters, but there's no real anger in her voice. Hanny leans in, her tone lowering. Look, we're sorry, okay? We were just really concerned about you. But having met him, seen him, now we understand. He seems nice. And, kinda cute. Minji lets out a sigh, shaking her head, but a smile creeps onto her lips. You're impossible, you know that? But you love us, Hanny says, smiling. Minji can't help but laugh. Yeah, I do. The night passes on, and they talk about lighter things, Minji's worry still lingering in the back of her head. She is well aware that her relationship with Xavian carries risk, but it is a risk she is willing to take. Later, as she's lying in her bed, Minji takes out her phone and texts Xavian. Hey, just wanted to say good night. And thank you for everything. A moment later, her phone vibrates with a message from him. Good night, Minji. Sweet dreams. And thank you for being you. With a smile, Minji sets down her phone and closes her eyes. She knows the coming days will be tough, but for now, she lets herself bask in the warmth of the moment. By the time she climbs into bed that night, Minji is filled with a peace she hasn't known in a while. She knows that it won't be easy, but with her friends beside her, she knows that they can face whatever comes.